So my name is Erin Senior, and if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you already, I wanted to let you know I'll be tonight's facilitator and host. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day city of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the First Nations, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat-Wyandot Nations. We recognize these peoples and their ancestors as people who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The city of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous peoples. And as a municipality, the city of Mississauga is actively working towards reconciliation by confronting our past and our present, providing space for Indigenous peoples within their territories to recognize and uphold their treaty rights. To support Indigenous peoples, we formally recognize the Anishinaabe origins of our name and continue to make Mississauga a safe space for all Indigenous peoples. Next slide. So, why are we here tonight? Tonight is the first community meeting to introduce the city's Dixie Outlet Mall policy review and gather ideas for how you think this site should be developed in the future. Many of you have participated in previous developer-led engagements, and some of you may be aware that the landowners have submitted a development application for the northern portion of the site. We will provide a quick update on that project near the end of the meeting, but it has a separate process with its own engagements, and it is not the focus of today's meeting. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I wanted to also first acknowledge and thank you for participating in the conversation tonight. I understand that the Dixie Outlet Mall is an iconic part of your community and that the proposed changes will elicit a wide range of opinions. I've been reading your comments on the project website, so thank you again for posting all of that. And I can see that we do share some ideas for future development at this and how it should be guided. And there are also lots of diverse ideas. All this is to say tonight that there's no one right answer. Tonight, we're here to have a respectful conversation and hold space for different ideas that will help guide the future development of this site. So let's review tonight's agenda. Tonight, I'll go over the housekeeping and how to participate in the meeting. Next, we'll hear opening remarks from Councillor Dasko. I will introduce the project team and they will present on the policy review. And following that, we're going to have 4 word polls similar to what you've seen with that first poll, which will ask you to provide additional ideas on movement through the sites, future parks and open spaces, built form, things like that. And then we're going to move into our Q&A. And for those of you, I just wanted to let you know that you're not going to be in this platform for the whole night. We're going to move actually everybody into this room so we can see one another, we can have a good conversation, you can raise your hand, you can chat. This is just really for the presentation component of the meeting. So I know that it's important for all of us to kind of see who's here tonight and who's in the room. And so that will be, we will move everybody in during the first 30-minute Q&A. And after we've had that first 30-minute Q&A, we're going to hear an update and next steps on the development application. Then we're going to have a second Q&A session for about another 30 minutes, but there is some flexibility with that. And again, we'll be open to any clarification questions you might have at that time about the policy review. And I just want to state again, I know you've heard this and you're probably going to hear it a couple times tonight, the development application has a separate process. And it will be hosting a community meeting on May 8th, where you can provide your comments on the proposed development. We'll be putting all this information in the chat. Again, it will be something that we'll make sure that you're aware of if you do have an interest in the development application. And really tonight, we're going to learn about the policy review and share ideas with each other about the future site development, which will then help to inform our guiding principles for the site. And then after the second Q&A, I'm going to start to wrap up the meeting. So now I'm just going to walk us through the housekeeping. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Great. So I stated the participation guidelines. I'm going to thank you again for contributing actively, respectively, and equitably during the meeting. I want you to note right now that the meeting is being recorded and the staff's presentation will be posted on the project website. I know someone had a question about that on the registration. So the presentation will be available on the project website after the meeting. Should you wish to review it or share it with someone who was unable to attend the meeting tonight, or if you're joining us by phone and you're unable to see this. If you'd like, there's also closed captioning. So if you go to your bottom left-hand side of your screen, there's a CC button. So just click that if you need it, and then you'll have closed captioning. And then we can go to the next slide, please. So, as I stated, we're going to have two opportunities to have a conversation tonight. I've discovered in hosting these virtual meetings that the most fruitful conversations happen when we're actually able to hear one another and see one another. So as I've stated before, when we start the Q&A, we're going to start to move everybody into the room. So you'll all become panelists and we'll all see one another. And that's when we can actually start to have our conversation. And because of this, I just suggest that you hold your questions until we get to the Q&A. If you feel more comfortable, you can add your questions to the chat. We won't be answering questions in the chat at this time, but we will be taking them and putting them onto our spreadsheet. And then when we get to the Q&A, I'm going to take a breather when we've during our dialogue and read out some of those questions to staff so they can answer them. As always, for those of you who have joined the meetings tonight, you've got to raise your hand. If you want to ask a question, I'll ask to unmute yourself and then you can speak your question. If you're joining us by phone, it's star 3 to raise your hand and then star 6 to unmute yourself. Because we do have a pretty big meeting tonight, I'm just going to ask that you limit your question to just one per person. I want to see if we can get as many people talking as possible. Again, if you have another question after your first one, feel free to raise your hand again and you'll go into the list of individuals who have their hand raised. I'm going to take the questions on a first come, first served basis. And if we can move to the next slide, that would be great. So I find the optimum arrangement for this kind of event is the stacked view. And so if you choose to, you can select this on your computer now. There's a layout option in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. And if you're on a mobile device, you can hit the more, the 3 dots icon for the layout and choose the stacked view. And again, as I said, after the presentation is done, our staff will bring you into the room so we can chat face-to-face about the ideas for the policy review. And let's go on to our technical support. So, as we know, technology can be troublesome at times. I wanted to let you know that we have 2 staff on board to help you with anything. Brandon's just added that into the chat right now. You can call Amina, and for those of you who are joining us on the phone, I'll read out her number at 905-615-3200, extension 4473. And you can email Trista at trista.james, G-A-M-E-S, at mississauga.ca, and they will assist you to the best of their abilities. So again, that information is in the chat. And please, if you have any technical issues at any point in time, just quickly message in the chat. I'll ask Brandon periodically throughout the meeting to put this information in again so that we don't run into any troubles. So I'm going to launch the second poll right now. I know that we've just found out about all our first jobs, which was really great. I'm just going to close that poll right now. So thank you again for doing that. And although we will be, sorry, if we can just move to the next slide, although we will be meeting each other in person and we're going to see each other's faces, I just wanted to take a moment. And if you want to put a couple responses in the Slido poll, who's in the room? So you can say things like resident, landowner, student, something like that. I'm going to leave that open just for a couple minutes while I move to the next slide. Great. Thanks, folks. So, great. We've got concerned neighbor. All right. Wonderful. So before we begin the presentation, I'd like to introduce Councillor Dasko. As you know, Councillor Dasko was elected as City of Mississauga Councillor for Ward 1. He's a lifelong resident and advocate in the community. The councillor has also been a long-time volunteer in the community and is a proud member of such organizations as the Army, Navy, Air Force Veterans Club, the Legion and the Lions Club, and he's a director of the Port Credit Village Project and a member of the board of directors for the Community Living Mississauga. With that, Councillor, I'd like to turn it over to you for your opening remarks for the meeting.
Thank you, Erin, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking your evening and spending it with us, which I think is on one of the most important projects that we do have. This is one that does have some history to it, and I think a lot of folks on the call might be aware of. But really, what this is to come in and to to have a presentation by our staff, I wanted to look at this in a holistic way, being very mindful and respectful of the community that we're in. As Aaron mentioned, I am a lifelong resident, and I do recall coming to this mall when it was an uncovered mall. Um, and so it's got a very long history, and also was a shopper, when I was younger over at Nob Hill Farms, and also played downstairs on some of the video games at the time. So it's got a lot of history for myself and for everybody in the community. And the idea here is um, to be collaborative and open and wanting to hear what everybody's thoughts and ideas are. And this is something that we've got great staff here from the city. Aaron's is going to be shepherding us through all this, and we've got David Farrow. We've got just all of the experts from the city on here, and we'll be able to answer questions and take in all the feedback as well. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, and also we do have the owner of a representative of the owner, one of the owners of the property, which is called Slate Asset Management, Stephen DeJunkie. He is also on the call, just listening in as well tonight. So thank you all again for joining us. And really, this is one just to have a good, open, frank, but respectful call, and much more road to be ahead of us. This is just the start of this whole process, and so thank you all again, and looking forward to the night ahead. Over to you, Aaron.
Thank you again, Councillor. So I'd now like to introduce tonight's presenters. Thank you. Karen Fong is a professional planner and has been with the city for over 20 years. Karen has experience leading community area policy, business improvement areas, and parking reviews. Karen's work has touched on various areas of Mississauga, including Lakeview, Cooksville, Fairview, Hospital, Moulton, Port Credit, and Streetsville. And David Farrow is a development planner for the city of Mississauga that has been working in the south portion of the city, processing major official plan amendments, rezoning and site plan applications, in addition to leading neighborhood-wide reviews and providing expert witness testimony at the OLT. David's born and raised in the city of Mississauga and demonstrates a passion for community building in the city that he calls home. He applies this through all the planning work he is involved in. So I want to thank every one of you for being here tonight. And Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you to start our presentation. Thanks again.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Erin, for that introduction. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are going to talk about the Dixie Outlet Mall policy review and go over why the city is doing a review of the site, its objectives, the current policy context, the study components, and timelines. So let's begin by discussing why we are undertaking a policy review. In the last few years, the owner has expressed interest to redevelop the mall. We understand that some of you may have participated in the landowner meetings, and more recently, in December of 2022, a development application submission was made to the city for a portion of the lands. And just last month, City Council directed planning staff through a motion to prepare an official plan amendment, or what is known as an OPA. The OPA will consider additional policies for the entire site that further guides growth and development in a manner that achieves a complete community and connectivity to the surrounding neighborhood. The province has also provided direction to build more housing. The site has been identified as an area of study for housing opportunities in the city's Housing Action Plan. Next slide, please. So the objectives of the policy review include the following: to help guide development of the mall site, to provide an opportunity for public engagement and comments, to work collaboratively on the future planning of the site, to review existing policy permissions to confirm appropriateness of the policies or any additional policy requirements, to consider elements that are key to achieving a complete community with new roads, pedestrian connections, transit supportive development, parks, a mix of land uses including affordable housing and non-residential uses, to also consider heights that are of an appropriate development scale. And lastly, the policy review would result in an OPA that could include site-specific policies. Later in the presentation, I will talk about what an OPA is and the policy context. Next slide. But before we begin, I would like us to have a look at where the site is situated in Mississauga. The Dixie Outlet Mall is located south of the QEW and west side of Dixie Road in southeast Mississauga. The site is quite large and covers approximately 19 hectares or 46 acres of the land area. The mall opened in 1956 and today has over 100 retail shops. It is surrounded by detached and or townhouses on the east and west sides of the site. To the south is the Lakeview Golf Course, and to the north is the QEW. The existing community is served by two local transit bus routes 4 and 5. A bus terminal is also located in the southeast area of the mall. And if you have visited the site area recently, you will find road construction underway. There are improvements by MTO to the QEW at Dixie, reconfiguration of the QEW Dixie interchange, and realignment of local service roads. Next slide, please. And now for some policy context. Let's get into the official plan. What is an unofficial plan? It is a long-term plan that provides the city's general land use planning policies to guide how land may be used. It is part of city building that affects how the city grows and touches on various elements including transportation, housing, culture and heritage, the environment, and the economy. The official plan contains policies that apply citywide or to site-specific areas. Changes to the official plan, or what is known as an official plan amendment or an OPA, requires a proposal, public engagement, and consideration by council. An OPA can be initiated by the city or a property owner. Any policy recommendations from this study will result in an OPA. And now let's go over how the Dixie Outlet Mall fits within the official plan structure. Next slide, please. The Dixie Outlet Mall site is located within the Lakeview neighborhood city structure of the official plan. In terms of its land use, the site is currently designated mixed use in the official plan. The mixed use designation allows for a broad range of uses. Some that we see on the site today are personal service establishments like hair salons, restaurants, retail stores, secondary office like the administrative office. Other uses include that are permitted include, for example, financial institutions, post-secondary educational facilities, and some residential uses. The official plan, as mentioned earlier, can contain area-specific policies, such as the Lakeview Local Area Plan. Specific policies were developed and approved by City Council in 2015 for the Lakeview neighborhood. The site is permitted heights of 2 to 4 stories and also contains additional policies that should be addressed as part of the development application review process. For example, Policy 10131 requires that future redevelopment of the Dixie Outlet Mall property will address the following, including, but not limited to, the addition of public roads to connect and improve the neighborhood's fine-grained road network, the retention of commercial space, and appropriate transition to adjacent residential uses. Next slide, please. So there are 5 study components: the background review and assessment, ideas and direction, draft policies, recommendations, and community feedback. The first component requires a background review and assessment. It is the information gathering stage that involves the review of data and existing official plan policies, including the Lakeview Local Area Plan. The second component is about formulating ideas on what the site could look like and key policy directions that can help in the preparation of the draft policies. The third component involves the preparation of the draft OPA and any policy refinements. The next component is the final recommendations that are brought to the Planning and Development Committee, or otherwise shortened to PDC, and to City Council. This includes the final proposed draft OPA for PDC's approval and the OPA bylaw for City Council's adoption. It is likely that the OPA will be a special site policy within the Lakeview Local Area Plan. The last component is the community feedback or engagement. You will see on the slide that the community feedback occurs at several stages through the study, and that's because the draft OPA is an iterative process that requires input at key stages. Tonight's meeting on ideas and direction is important for us to hear from you on how the site could develop and other things that should be taken into consideration. Your ideas will help establish some key guiding principles and formulate new official plan policies for the next stage. Later in the year, we will be gathering feedback on the draft policies, and there will also be opportunity for you to provide comments in other ways, such as at the PDC meeting. Next slide. So this slide provides an outline of the policy review process and timelines. Tonight, we are at the beginning of the process. It is the kickoff meeting to gather ideas and direction for the mall site. Draft official plan policies are anticipated for later in the fall, in which a second community meeting will be held. Also in the fall, a public meeting will be held and an information report will be presented to the PDC. Towards the end of the year or by early next year, the final policy recommendations will be brought to PDC for approval, and following approval of the policies, the OPA would be brought forward for adoption by City Council. Next slide. Tonight, we want to get your view on what this site could look like. We first explored this with you by posing some questions on the city's project page on themes about movement, uses, parks and open spaces, and building types and heights. We asked questions like, how can we improve movement through the site and connections to existing neighborhoods? Some of the ways may include roads for cars and buses, cycling paths, and pedestrian connections. How important is it to include retail office buildings and other services into the new development? What should the mix of uses be on this site? What is important for future parks and public spaces on the site? Do we need to think differently when planning parks and open spaces for this community? And what types of buildings should be on the site and how tall should they be? What should be the mix and location of building types? We have already received a number of comments as these have been posted on the city's project page, and I want to thank you for the comments. The responses along with tonight's conversation will be used to begin to formulate principles that will inform the policy review and in turn become the key guiding principles in the official plan amendment.
Okay, so getting back into it. So how did we get to this development application stage? So the initial approach from Slate and Choice Properties a few years ago was looking at a redevelopment for the entire site. And many of you probably attended the community meetings that was hosted by Slate in the mall at that time and provided comments and feedback and went through that process. So that was the first iteration. Since then, since Slate engaged the city on that concept, they've taken a step back and have come back to us with the development application only for the northwest portion of the site, and hence the development application that we see today. So why is the development application taken in? Well, the Planning Act, which is provincial legislation, requires municipalities that upon the receipt of all the information that we need in terms of studies and drawings and things that we need to assess applications, we have to circulate them and review them and provide comments, and at the end of the day provide a decision on development applications. So that's what we see today in terms of that process. As Aaron mentioned already, May the 8th is the next meeting in that particular process, and that'll be held at City Hall. It's called the public meeting under the Planning Act, and it will be associated with an information report by staff that again details the proposal in terms of all the stats and provides an ability for residents to come out and give feedback on the development application itself. But again, I think we've iterated a bunch of times today, the focus is the rest of the site in terms of the exercise that the city is doing. Can I get the next slide, please? So very briefly, I know everyone's familiar with the proposal. So you'll see on the left side there the site plan that has been submitted by the applicant and is part of the review package of materials. And again, you can find this on the city's active development applications website, where we host all our information related to active development applications. So it's important to note that this application is being reviewed under today's policy framework. But as we process the application, it's intended to have regard for the exercise that's going on today. So very briefly, the proposal incorporates 5 towers ranging from 9 stories to 25 stories, including podiums going from 2 stories to 7 stories. You can see them sort of plotted on the blocks below. The proposal also includes a public park that straddles Hague Boulevard and then comes sort of east onto the site. And this proposal requires the demolition of a portion of the mall. You can see very faintly there's a red dotted line that is almost square-like, and that's required to be removed to accommodate this proposal. And then the proposal also proposes an access onto South Service Road, as you can see there. So again, this is the application in a nutshell. May 8th is the next meeting. That'll be the first meeting in a line of extra meetings that we'll be having on that. That'll be scheduled, and notice will go out once we do that, in terms of the ward council hosting a community meeting, and then ultimately getting a recommendation report meeting on this application in the future. So I think that's it. At this point, I'll turn it back to Aaron. And again, if you have any comments on this application, feel free to email it to my email. It's david.farrow@mississauga.ca. And I'm always available to sort of further the dialogue in terms of any questions that you might have on this application.
Not a problem, Aaron, and thanks again, everybody, for joining tonight. This is a meeting that I've called for. This whole process I have, because the whole idea is something will happen with the property, and the whole idea here is to solicit everybody's input and get feedback and everything into what is going forward. I will start off and say that, and I have seen, and I always take in, because we've done public meetings for every single development application. This is a little bit of a different one, because there is a development application which has come in for part of the property, but this is for looking at the entirety of the property in a holistic way. And so this tends to be a little different. What I would always encourage, and I always do, is please get your thoughts and feedback in. That's what this whole exercise is for. The Dixie Mall policy review is really putting in what you want to see of the property. Also put in what you don't want to see with the property, but I would really solicit everybody and encourage everybody to put in what you do want to see on the property, in terms of amenities, etc., green space, what type of how much residential, what type of residential, etc. Put all of these ideas and thoughts forward. I will tell you, in a bigger sphere, I'm looking at doing this in a holistic way, and as the city is with all of the the planning staff, etc. here. There's other ways that planning gets done these days, and this is through the province. The province, we are subservient to the province, and that is just the way it is. Tomorrow, if the city, if the province wanted to, with the strike of a pen, they could wipe out the city of Mississauga. They could wipe out any municipality right across Ontario. It is their purview to do so. When it comes to density numbers, and I think there's maybe some miscommunication on how this works, but basically that gets mandated to the municipalities. In this particular case, every time if you turn on CP24 or a newspaper, etc., you'll see the 1.5 million homes that the government talks about at the province. That's everywhere. And they've been mandated here in the city of Mississauga by the province to take on, over the next 10 years, 120,000 units, which is 12,000 a year. Now, there's nothing in the planning, in any planning legislation that prescribes where something can happen. And this is people that own pieces of property that put out these these proposals. We've turned down a significant amount. I will tell you, I've voted against probably more than anybody on council because, and a lot of them are down in our neighborhoods because they're not good enough. They don't fit in with our communities. So this is what the exercise is here, to see what you feel is appropriate and would like to fit into the community and what you'd like to see. Now, I will also mention with that, whenever you hear that, and again, Zell, I see your comment. I'm also a resident here, and I'm a lifelong resident, as everybody else, and so you know what, I always call out. I'm more of a community advocate than I am a politician. I'll tell you that much. I think I've probably offended more people at the province and the federal government than I can probably shake a stick at, and I really don't care because this is all about community, and I always will fight and will continue to fight for our community. And so right now we do have across the city what they call 20,000 approved units, and so all that they're requiring right now is for a building permit to be pulled. That hasn't happened. There's also an additional I also, there's also an additional 40,000 plus as of right, which means they don't need to change zoning or go for an official plan amendment or anything like this, that they can just plunge a shovel right into the ground. And that has yet to happen. So in total, we're actually, if you do the full aggregate, there's probably closer to 70,000 units already. And so what the province is asking for is an additional 120,000. And so this is, to say it's concerning is an understatement. Development charges have been significantly curbed back. They go into things like community centers, parks, roads, infrastructure, etc. So that's very concerning, and we've been very vocal about that, and we'll continue to be vocal about it because it's absolutely wrong what's happened. And so I'll give you one example is we have had some plans that have been approved but yet to be built. In one case that's going on 30 years. So the province does not tell you that there's a sunset clause on an application. Once they're approved, they're approved. And so this is a significant problem because essentially a lot of development ends up getting controlled by a supply side. So I just mentioned that to you. But again, I want to come back to this particular exercise. And this exercise really is about what you want to see here, and being proactive about things. I'll reference over to Brightwater, for example. I saw Dorothy on the line earlier who was instrumental from day one in a very positive way, and working with, and this is where community came together with city and the developers to come up with with a proposal there that had a mix and was appropriate and is getting built out. So that's what I encourage, is more collaboration here, and again, that's why I mentioned to get your thoughts, etc. in. The other that I just wanted to wrap up with is, for example, Dixie Road was mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to make mention that I did bring forward a motion up at the region. It is a regional road, and so one of the things that I have asked, and there's a third-party review that the region has undertaken, is being done right now, and that's looking at taking there's sidewalks on either side of Dixie, and that goes from Lakeshore up. And what I've asked is if one side could be turned into essentially a cycling lane, that would get, because right now it's a road paint, as I think many know, and I don't believe that is an appropriate way to do things. So we're looking at having that moved off to the side, and so that is work that's underway right now. We've also brought speeds down there from 60 to 50 as well. Also, I just wanted to make mention, there was also a comment about GE Booth. And I actually do have some development charges dedicated up at the region going into covering GE Booth. So all of that odor will get mitigated there as well. And so that is over the next few years, that work is actually, there's a bunch of work underway now. and that will continue for the next few years ahead. So
Thank you.
I really do encourage everybody to get their thoughts and ideas in, and thanks Aaron and team again for tonight. And please, if you could maybe post that link again on how to participate in terms of getting your thoughts in. Thank you very much.